melding of PTC technology, best practices, and industry standards. And the resulting solution helps them and provide training for their customers. They build, manage, and deliver their own training quickly and efficiently, just the way their customers can and will do with the Arbortext solution. Pushpinder has been part of PTC and previously Arbortext for 11 years, and in that time she's had a number of roles: course trainer, curriculum developer, and project manager. She's from Chicago, but today she calls Ann Arbor, Michigan home. Pushpinder.
Yes, hi, thank you very much, Liz. Can I just validate that you can see my screen here, my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome everybody. I think Liz did a really good introduction, and as she mentioned, I am here to talk specifically about how PTC University is using Arbortext as well as Windchill technologies to create, manage, and publish all of our training content. And today I'm going to show you a little bit about what we did, why we chose to do it, what some of the results have been, and then at the very end I've got a couple of screenshots for those of you that are familiar with Arbortext, just to show you a little bit about what our environment looks like. So let me get started here. So as I mentioned, I'll talk about why we had to do this, what the challenge was, what strategy we used, what our solution looks like, what some of the results and the outcome has been, and then, as I mentioned, the environment itself. And then, Janice, let me know if anybody has questions throughout this, and I can stop and try to address it at that point.
Will do.
Okay. So just a really quick introduction into what is PTC University. We are responsible for all of the customer-facing as well as internal customer training that we provide to customers. So that includes all of the curriculum. So that includes Arbortext curriculum, Windchill, Pro Engineer, Wildfire, Co-Create, IsoDraw, any product that PTC owns. PTC University is responsible for building that training and delivering it. So I highlighted a couple of areas here just to show how much we actually do. We've got over 4,000 hours of content that we have that's either classroom-based, virtual, or WBTs. It's supported in 9 languages. Some of you on the phone, you may have additional languages, you may have less. We actually localize all of our content into those 9 languages. We've also got a lot of global coverage where not only do we internally train and deliver these classes, we've also got partners that are certified to deliver it. We've got a learning management system called Precision LMS where we offer these WBTs with audio files, with simulation files, with assessments all included in it. We've also got tailored learning programs, so we want to make sure that what your role is, you're taking the classes that are specific to that role. So PTC University is quite a large part, revenue-generating part of PTC, and we are also all scattered all over the globe. So we are not only in one location, we're all co-located, and I think that's pretty usual these days. We've got a production team that's in Pune, India. We've got course developers that are in Europe, in Asia, in the U.S., and even within the U.S., we're not all located at corporate headquarters. For example, I'm in Ann Arbor. We've got people in our Minnesota office. We have people that work from home. So we've got a lot of different scenarios that we have to support for this user community. So the challenge to PTC University was 4 big things, and those of you that are in the training world can probably nod and agree to some of these. So first of all, reduce costs, which I think is always the case. A lot of our costs was in the time and the money it took to localize our content, in printing and shipping our guides, and the time that it took for development and review of the content. We also wanted to be able to offer additional curriculum, as I mentioned, role-based training, some best practice training, any customer vertical training, so what manufacturing versus pharmaceutical, operational efficiency, so that would be any of our standard curriculums, any country-specific training, any curriculum that we acquire based on companies that we acquire, And then also some strategic programs. We want to be able to more quickly offer custom and configure training, which would be maybe a customer wants their own screenshots included, maybe a customer wants chapters 4, 5, and 8, and that's the only training they want, so we need to be able to support that, as well as a precision learning program through Precision LMS, which is our learning management system. All of these challenges, all of these things, they basically pointed to a new training approach that we needed to support. And that new training approach was a new strategy that we had to come up with. Specifically, that strategy was to have our source as single topics, and all of those topics would then get configured into product training, into the customer training, and any configure training. So basically, it's a main library that we keep all of these topics in. And this was before knowing that we were going to use DITA or that there was a standard out there or anything like that. It was basically the idea of we need smaller topics, we need them to be reusable, we need them to be stackable into all of these different configurations, and then all of the different outputs. And if you have done any training or had to work on documentation, you know that today you may only have one type of output that you support. Maybe all you do is PDF. And then down the road, you know, maybe you need to support the iPhone, and you need to support the Kindle, and you need to support other smartphones. There's all sorts of new technology coming out. So we needed to be able to support that and have more than just one output or two outputs. We needed to look ahead to the future. One of the other things was looking at a topic configuration database. So what we did is, this is basically, you could consider this a taxonomy. We looked at our products. So in this example, it's Pro Engineer. We broke it down into modules. The modules broke down into topics, which broke down into subtopics. And then those subtopics is where we came up with, in the DITA world, a concept, a reference, a task. And we were able to apply taxonomies into the actual data so that in the database, which in our case is pretty much using Windchill, all of these different pieces of content. So the subtopic is complex. We can have the taxonomy of rounds on it. Rounds came from modeling. Modeling came from Pro Engineer. So somebody can very easily, or more easily than they can do today, which this didn't exist at that time within the curriculum at all, but be able to do searches very quickly and easily. I'm looking for something that has to do with rounds. I'm looking for something that has to do with drawings, and then be able to walk the database and search through it and give me all of the topics that I can reuse based on that taxonomy. The taxonomy is going to be different for each product and, of course, for each company based on what you are writing your documentation or your training on. This is just an example of one that we had and that we used. The basic solution came down to a technology where we took Arbortext Editor and the DITA standard to author. We use Windchill, or of course you can use ACM, which is Arbortext Content Manager, which is just another way of using a CMS, but it's more geared towards Arbortext and XML. But we use Windchill to manage and collaborate all of our content. I mentioned to you earlier, we've got people that are all over the world, that are all in different time zones, so just passing files back and forth, or even saving them just on a standard Windows location is just not ideal. We use Arbortext Publishing Engine and one of our customizations called the Composition Launcher to actually publish our content, and I'll show you a little screenshot of that later on. The Composition Launcher, though, is a way for us to publish various different deliverables all at one time. So I need to publish the instructor guide, the student guide, the slides, my exercise book, et cetera, and I just check mark and select all of them. I hit publish, it goes off to PE, and it gives me those 5 or 6 things that I've asked for. Then we also deliver and track, which is the Precision LMS that I mentioned to you earlier. We are also going to be very shortly, we're still working on developing this, we're just at the tail end, to be able to take our content and also output it as a SCORM package, which is really important to us because SCORM is a standard in the industry today. And if you're not using our Precision LMS, maybe a customer has their own LMS and they want to be able to take our training course and provide it to their users, what they can do is just take it as a SCORM package, push it into their LMS, and then they're able to have their users take the same training that they would have gotten in Precision LMS. We've also got an ILP Kit, which, whoops, sorry, I don't know what I just did. We've also got what we call an ILT Kit, which is really just the PDF and the HTML version of the course. This is important because, again, if you've done training, it's really hard for a student to be viewing a PDF and then trying to work in the software at the same time. So what we did is we built kind of a slim version that they can keep on the left-hand side of their screen, which is just the exercises. It's an HTML guide. So they can still have the software up on screen and be working with it, and then on the left, kind of like a help page, they can keep the HTML steps up for them. So that's a little bit about the technology. So what we use to author it. Ditto is something that when we first started using it had just become kind of an industry standard. We started this whole solution, this whole technology discussion, strategy, I would say about 4 years ago, 4 to 5 years ago this started. And what helped a little bit more was when Arbortext was acquired by PTC. So PTC University was pretty much able to use its own products to create this solution. So we came up and said, okay, great, there's Ditto, and then there's a solution that we can use, and then of course SCORM. Single source authoring, this is probably a phrase you hear quite a bit when you hear about Arbortext and you hear about using all of the different parts of the solution. So single source authoring is the idea that I author in one location and then I'm able to push it out and publish it in various different outputs without going back to my source and having to redesign or redevelop it in any way or worry about margins or size of a sheet size. Is it A4? Is it 8.5 by 11? It's the idea that I keep all of my content. I'm more worried about being a subject matter expert than I am worried about being a formatting expert. I author all of my content, and then I go ahead and output it. So at the very bottom here, you see a screenshot. It just says, here's my Arbortext XML data, and I publish it to, in this case, I've got 5 different deliverables. All of these are real deliverables that we have within PTC University. There's the guide. That guide, we also publish it into what we call an overhead PDF. And that overhead PDF, it looks like a PowerPoint slide, but it's not really a PowerPoint slide. It takes the content, pushes it into a view that the instructor can then use on an overhead to really point out the main idea of the lecture content. And that's all done automatically. The author doesn't have to worry about how do they resize it, what are they doing to get it to look like a slide. All they worry about, again, is authoring it in one location, being the experts for it, and then letting the style sheets do the rest of the work. We also have an agenda that gets pulled out. There's the HTML that I mentioned to you earlier for the exercise. It's the slim version. And then we've also got the recorded lecture. Okay, so those are just some samples. Now, one of the things I guess I did fail to mention at the very beginning is what did PTC University use before? I talked about all of these different things. We wanted to decrease the cost. We wanted operational efficiency. And we were a typical customer, I think, that comes to Arbortext, which is we used Word, we used PowerPoint, we used Microsoft Excel. Even using those 3 products, you've got 3 different versions, and nothing's kept in sync. People are making changes. They're stealing your content. I think everybody's had that happen where they use your PowerPoint, reuse it, and they change a couple things, and you have no idea that they've done that or that they've taken that the liberty with it. So we had the typical same problems of anybody that comes in and says, okay, I need single source authoring. I need a content management system to make sure people don't steal my IP, and I need an authoring system like Arbortext that will let me publish all these deliverables without doing all of that extra work for formatting them every single time. The results from this are pretty impressive. We're still in just the beginning phases of having this all rolled out, having it all working with the different technology pieces. But the scorecard that was originally used by management, by the stakeholders to prove to upper management of what they wanted out of this project were financial, making sure they had customer satisfaction, that they affected their business processes, and that there was learning and growth. For example, if you look at the very first row here for financial, they wanted to reduce printing costs, and they wanted to reduce what it cost for localization. And the measure that they did reach, so you see the check marks next to all of these because they were achieved, was that they wanted a 30% cost reduction for just the Wildfire 3 content, which is what the curriculum was at the time. We're actually working on Wildfire 6 right now. But they wanted 30% cost reduction, and they wanted 20% cost reduction in the curriculum localization costs, which both of those were achieved. If you look at the business processes, they wanted to reduce the time it took for the PDF creation, for the WBT content, and for configuring guides. And we did 30 to 40% reduction in all of those. Our production for localized content, so if we had the English version of a course completed today, it was taking anywhere from 4 to 6 months before the localized versions were ready and available and published and released. Now you can imagine, even if we take the lower end of that, even if we say, okay, it's only 3 months or it's only 4 months, that's an entire quarter. And in that time, sometimes you even have products that are ready for the next release 8 months down. So you're almost at the tail end of a next version before you're even done with the localized version. And that was just not acceptable. It wasn't very effective. It wasn't very business savvy in terms of being able to give the content to the users quickly. And there really wasn't much to be done about it because we didn't have single source. We didn't have automated processes in place, so there really wasn't much to be done where we could save on localization costs. But by putting the technology into place, again, a 30 to 40% cost reduction, time reduction means if something took 3 months, it now takes a month and a half, and that's a pretty impressive number. And this, again, is just in the beginning phases of this. Of rolling it out, of getting it developed, of getting it out to the user community. As I think a couple of more, another year passes, another 2-year passes, those numbers will go up even more tremendously. Just a quick analysis that, again, the stakeholders and management put together was we took the Pro Engineer Wildfire 4.0 course and it was being updated to the 5.0 release. And there were 3 courses that were looked at. There's the introduction course, which is 5 days long. This is an ILT, so instructor-led training. Advanced assemblies, which was 3 days, and detailing, which was 3 days. So right there, you're looking at 11 days worth of curriculum for an update from a 4.0 version to a 5.0 version. The results were that there was 60% reduction just in this one course curriculum in development time. And the ratio is 30 to 1. For development delivery ratio. And what that means in most organizations, for training organization, that means it takes me 30 hours to develop 1 hour of curriculum. Okay? And again, that includes both the ILT version of the course and the WBT, so all the audio recordings, the simulations, anything else you're putting together. Industry standards, I think, are more around, I've heard anywhere from 60 hours to 80 hours for 1 hour of content that is fully functional, fully released, and available to the user. So a 30 to 1 ratio is also pretty good for any curriculum development team. In this curriculum, we had a 50% reduction in the localization for an ILT, 70% reduction in the WBT localization, and 40% just in the overall cost for localization. And a lot of the content was reused from 4.0 to 5.0, so we were able to take a piece of lecture, a concept that was lecture content, and just literally take it 100% and reuse it in 5.0. And that was never the case before. There was always either a tweak or you had to literally make a copy and make the changes to it, and that took time. And we didn't have to do that. We were able to baseline our content, and then we were able to reuse it for that particular 5.0. And again, as I mentioned, as we continue with other course curriculums, we'll continue to look at these, analyze more curriculums and analyze where we were before and where we are today. So a little bit about the environment of what this kind of looks like. So our development solution, again, on the left-hand side, just to reiterate, we've got topic authoring using DITA. We're using Arbortext Editor. We've got developers that are all over. We're outputting to PDF, or excuse me, we're inputting, we're taking content that may have been in Word, that may have been in PDFs, may have been XML. All of that is being created into content that we then are storing into Windchill. All of the course topics are stored in Windchill, and they're all done in separate libraries. So each product has its own library, which I'll show you in a screenshot in a little bit. We've also got some translation outsourcing happening. We're using something called the Translation Management Library, TML, which is kind of a add-on into Windchill, which helps us to be able to zip up our content in very small chunks and send it off for localization. So we don't have to wait until an entire course is ready for translation or localization. We can send off one module at a time, let the localization folks work on it while the course developer works on modules 2 and 3. One comes back from translation, then we send off 2 and 3, and the course developer's working on 4 and 5, and so on. So it's a process that's running parallel rather than a gate where we have to wait for something to finish, the gate closes, then we send it off for a localization, then it comes back to us. It's no longer like that. We're doing multiple content that's being sent off by being able to use TML for this. We send off all of those topics that are exported out of Windchill, and they're sent off to Publishing Engine using the composition launcher. And again, being able to deliver and track in different methods, which is either SCORM or normal ILT content or using an LMS. Here's a quick screenshot that I want to show you. We're actually using multi-level maps, and if you've done course development, this should make sense in the idea that you've got lessons. Lessons are in modules, and modules make up courses. So we were able to take that standard idea of how content is created and actually build maps out of it. So let's start all the way on the left here. This is my course called Modeling with Pro-E Wildfire 4. And everywhere you see map ref in parentheses is pretty much a module. Okay, it's a map that's being referenced. So the second box that you see here is a module called Advanced Selection. It contains 2 additional maps that are being referenced. And that module, those 2 additional maps, are actually lessons. So the first one that you see here is a lesson called Advanced Chain Selection. And that breaks down into a concept and into a procedure. So if I were to double-click and open either of those pieces, I would see the XML content that makes up that lecture or the concept, and that makes up that exercise or that procedure. So multi-level maps are useful on many different levels. One is the fact that if I have a lesson map, I can now make sure if somebody reuses Advanced Chain Selection, I now can force them to always make sure that that concept and that exercise travel together. And that wasn't always the case before. Somebody would take a piece of lecture note, and then they wouldn't take the exercise, or they didn't know which exercise was supposed to go with it, or they would have multiple exercises. We've all seen wizards, right? You've seen them in Word, you've seen them in different products. A wizard that walks you through step by step. What one of our curriculums does, the Windchill curriculum, is there's a lot of wizards. And let's say it's an 8-step wizard. What they do is they actually create 8 procedures, one for each page of that wizard. And those 8 now travel together along with the concept. If you didn't have that multi-level map, if you didn't have that sub-map of this lesson, somebody may only grab the wizard pieces 1 through 6 and not realize that 7 and 8 were missing. So it's much easier to just take this clump and paste it into, reuse it into a module map, and then take the module map and reuse it as is, if you want, into the course map. Okay? So 3 different levels: course map, module map, lesson map. So we go from big to small, and we allow users to either author from top down or bottom up. Some people like doing top down. is because it's more of an outline approach, and DITA really does support and allow you to do that. Some people work from the bottom up, which means they build their individual concepts and exercises, and then they put them together. They assemble them later. So again, you can do either way. It doesn't matter. In terms of PDS, which is our Windchill content management system, and the Arbortext browser, I wanted to show a screenshot of just how the browser appears and the libraries that I was referring to. So if you look here, anything that's prefaced with RCS stands for Reusable Content Strategy, which is that strategy we had to come up with of the topic base, the taxonomies. So everything is prefaced with RCS _, and then we have, you can see here, we have an Arbortext library, an IsoDraw, Co-Create, what else we got here on the screenshot? Wildfire, and MathCAD, and then down below you'd see Windchill, and then any other product lines that we may add later. We've also got libraries. Again, this is strategy-wise how we set this up for our environment. We also have libraries that have to do with global icons and images that are reused, a global reuse. And what that one is I'm sure every company always has a copyright notice that's fully approved and we have to use. That doesn't, we have one copy of it, everybody's supposed to go use that one and not make their own unique one. Sometimes you may have an appendix that's shared across courses or across books. You may have kind of an intro page that explains how the manual is set up. It doesn't matter what curriculum you're working on, the manual is always set up the same way. So maybe you want to reuse that content. So that all goes into that particular library. And then if we look at the subfolders here, so we look at the Wildfire product library that I've circled, inside of that are all of our maps, our DITA maps, which would be the module maps, the module maps, and the lesson maps. All of the exercises get stored into their own folder. We have a folder where the PDF renditions of all of the maps are automatically created by Windchill, and they get stored into that published content folder. We also have an area where the users can look at the taxonomy maps if they aren't sure how they're, what taxonomy they're supposed to be filling in, and then a little bit about the descriptions and the agenda schedules. So each curriculum, we normally don't have course developers work across curriculums too much. They're really subject matter experts in one curriculum, so this, by giving them their own library that they store everything in and they have access to, it kind of makes it easier for them to use as well. We've also got an assessment library. I don't have a screenshot of this, but I did want to point out that all of our assessments, we used to create them in a spreadsheet in Excel. So the user would go and create the questions, what's the right answer, is there any learning objective based on the answer that they gave, and we had a process that took those questions and placed them into a database, and that was kind of, again, not reusable, very easily reusable, and again, we were using something like Excel to do the work that we could easily do in XML. So that's what we've done. We've slowly exported all of our content that used to be in that database into XML. And now users go to File New, and they create a new true-false question, or maybe a new multiple-choice question, knowledge question, etc., by just going to File New, creating it, checking it into the repository. It gets stored into the assessment folder, and then somebody down the road can reuse that question based on taxonomy, or build their own new question if it doesn't apply to what they're doing. And we also have assessment maps. So each course might have an assessment at the module level, an assessment at the course level. It doesn't matter. We're able to use that. And the assessment, by the way, is we are using the DITA learning object model for that. Some of our specializations that we had to do for the concept and for the exercise, we did pre-DITA's learning object model because it wasn't yet in place, nor was it finalized. As I mentioned, we started this several years ago. But now that we were ready to do assessment questions, we were able to take advantage of the DITA standard, of the assessment standard for questions, and reuse that. So that is really the quick and dirty of what we do within PTC University and my presentation here. I wanted to ask if there were any questions that have come up or anything that folks are interested in knowing about. Feel free to ask. I don't know, Janice, is that a
Yes,
open
so if
mic?
you,
Or?
no, they're all muted, so if you have questions, please feel free to type it into the question box, and I will ask for you. Or if you raise your hand, I can actually unmute you. This was an excellent, excellent presentation. There was so much in there. I think a lot of times it was as if you were reading my mind. I had a question in my head, and then the next phrase, you answered it. It's like, wow. So I have one question from the audience. Could you describe who the users are and how they interact with the system? So from a receiver of training using this, I guess.
So all of our course developers are they're either previous trainers, so they've done ILT training or had to deliver training, or they come from like product development, so that they're or consulting, services, so they are experts in their field, and they have to. I'm not sure what the interact part of the question was. How they interact with it, was that the question?
Yeah, let me ask a clarifying question if they could just clarify what they meant by that.
Yeah, but that's a good question of who are these course developers, where did they come from, and what's their background? And I think like a lot of other big organizations, it's usually somebody who's been out in the field for quite a while, for a couple of years, and they slowly move into training, or they're ex-trainers so that they know how to build the curriculum and come into the environment.
Mm-hmm. Oops. So another question, do they also build the courses that the end user sees?
Yes, they are responsible for building all of the concepts and the exercises, and they're responsible for building the maps that make the content that we then publish and push out to the end user.
Okay. And I have one attendee who has his hand up, so let me unmute him.
Sure.
Wade, go ahead. Okay, maybe he accidentally raised his hand.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let me try.
And I do want to point out, for those of you that maybe are new to the training business or understanding some of the facets of the training, I mentioned earlier that we do have a production team in Pune. One of the things that they also do, kind of piggybacking off the question of what is the course developers responsible for, once they've passed off the course, we have a whole different set of folks that do QA or tech validation, which means I wrote 10 steps for this exercise. Did I miss a step? Did I do a wrong screenshot? And actually validating that the software, that you have written what the software is supposed to do in that exercise. So the course developer, once they've written it, they pass it off to not only review, meaning for punctuation or spelling errors and so forth, but they also have to pass it off for actual technical validation of what they've written, if it's really true. And we have a whole team, production team, that helps with that.
Okay, hang on. I'm just helping one of the listeners with asking questions. Evidently, there's a group of them in a room.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So he wasn't on a mic where he could talk. So we'll give him a minute here. So while we're waiting for Wade, Another, I think this is half a question, so I'm just going to read this to you. One of the listeners was asking something in the line of assemble the modules in the correct order, but I'm missing, I think, the first part of that question. It seems a little incomplete.
And this is a real big help for our custom education group because we do two things. We do custom education, which means I like the content, but maybe I want it in a different order, or I need an intro piece from another class pulled in, which is different than configured, which is where we'll maybe take a customer's actual environment and redo all the exercises or redo the steps so that it follows their specific environment. But if you can imagine for somebody that says, hey, I love this course, but there's one module that doesn't apply to me, and I'd rather have this module from a different course because, I don't know, it's an introductory topic that I want my users to learn. If you do them as topic-based, right, and you do them as these modules, you can move things around so much more easily than if you had slides and you're having to move slides around and make sure that the numbering is correct and the module numbers are coming in correctly. So this is something that's really helping not only our standard education group, but our custom and configured group, which is a totally different part than the standard authors.
Hang on one second. I just need to.
Do you want me to ask the next question, Janice?
Actually, I want you to go find the dial-in number for me so that we can send that to that individual. Sorry, the person out.
Okay.
The person out. Okay, go ahead.
It shows me. It says 312-878-0218.
Okay, so requester, go ahead and dial that number. Use the webinar ID that I gave you, and you'll be able to come in. I will see your phone light up, and then I will unmute you once you're there. Meanwhile, a couple more questions came in.
Okay.
Yeah, because they wanted to go ahead and ask you verbally themselves. So while we're waiting for them, one question from the audience. What was your experience with finding a writing style that works when a topic is presented on its own or in the context of a longer document?
So a writing style when a topic is presented on its own or as part of a larger, that was one of the difficult things because people are used to monolithic documents and they're used to being able to say, in the next module you'll learn this, or remember we talked about XYZ previously, and we really had to stop users from doing that. Even using the word see below for this table, because sometimes the table wasn't below, it was on the next page because of how it published. So it was more of a learning curve that we had to ask users to think in smaller chunks, and that they had to start thinking about how the wording of how they were writing their content, to think not previous, not past, that might be happening. So it was really just a training issue, and it was more of a shift issue that users eventually got the hang of.
Okay. Okay, and I see that Wade, I'm going to go ahead and unmute. Wade? Wade, can you hear us? Hi, Wade.
Hello? Hey, there you are.
Hi.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Good. Go ahead and ask your question. Pushpinder can hear you.
Hi, yeah, I got a couple of my colleagues here. I work for a company called General Atomics, and we currently use Arbortext and Windchill to develop IEDM content. And we were very interested in using this product, but I'm a little confused. I had a question about, I mean, you're talking about training developers that on your side, we were under the impression that we would have this as a product that we would buy that would fit into the suite of products that we already use to develop our own in-house training. Is that the case? I mean, we're looking for a generic, we're looking for a solution that is more organic to the company.
Yeah, I must have misunderstood. So this would be you as a company, your course developers going to file new, having the same things that we use from a reusable content strategy view and being able to create your own training.
Okay. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make sure that I was on the right track here, and because this is definitely something that we want to pursue and maybe you know, have a one-on-one with your company and ours to see, you know, what kind of solution that we can come up with.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. You're right. I misunderstood the question. I answered it differently. But yeah, this would be for a company to use, not for us to create for you and put it together.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Thanks.
Great.
Sure.
Wade, does that answer your question? So I'm going to go ahead and mute you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I got another question. I mean, are we going to be able to either have the PowerPoint slides, or do you have? Can I get a point of contact?
This
so
is
that
a great, this is a great question, Wade. And I'll be happy to reach out to you directly following this presentation. This presentation is recorded, so you will be able to play this back. It takes usually a couple of days before I can get it up and posted, because we want to make sure we get it all translated into something that will allow you to play it freely.
Okay.
So that should take a day or two, and I'll be sure I reach out with you directly following this presentation.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that'll give me a chance to run it by my leadership, and then once we talk, we can work out a solution.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute you for right now. I got a couple more questions from the audience. Okay. So somebody wants to know if a non-course developer can interact with the system, for example, an instructor who needs to build a custom course. That's a really good question.
So right now, if they want to do that, if an instructor wants to do that, they do have to install Arbortext and the application and everything else with it. We are looking long-term at a solution that's a bit more user-friendly, so you don't have to go through all that installation process, and somebody could more on the fly be able to create content or be able to contribute content. But right now, if an instructor wanted to do it, they would have to go through the install process and run through everything we have our user community do.
Okay, great. And I have one more question here. Are the templates they created for overhead PDFs available for us to use?
They are not templates for the overhead PDFs. It's still you're building the content in the XML template for a procedure or a concept, and then it's the style sheet that actually takes them and pushes them into slides for an overhead. So it's not a template that can be distributed for use. It's really the style sheet doing the work.
Okay, great. Okay, do we have any more questions? I don't have any more in the queue right now, so I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Liz just to kind of talk a little bit more about, hang on one second. Is the style sheet available for us to use? Is the style sheet available for us to use?
It is part of our custom application, so right now it is not available for distribution or use. But we're happy to kind of work with somebody and show them how to do it or what work we did to get that done.
Okay. Great. So, Liz?
Before we go, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone about all of the resources available to the Arbortext community. As many of you know, ours is a large and very active community. I've got a chart here. It's from the list maintained by us, Single Sourcing Solutions. The URL for this page is shown at the bottom of the screen. That way you don't need to remember all the different URLs and all the ideas. You just need the one at the bottom. This is as near a complete a list as we've got. They're all free resources, or most of them are, and almost all are online. Going down and across kind of quickly. Mailing list, there are two. Adapters has been around since 1997. Arbortext R&D and Product Management monitors and answers questions on the list. Mostly it's users. 3v2 users is focused on the advanced print publisher product, and that mailing list also has been around since the early 2000s. The Adapters Code Archive is a repository of custom codes, snippets, and other useful bits, all freely available. The forums at PTC, these have more visibility than the mailing lists, and a lot of people are starting to monitor and answer questions there, but it's kind of in its infancy and not as many people with deep knowledge are there for Arbortext. The exception here is ISODraw. There is no better place to get ISODraw information than here on the forums. Technical committees, these are driven by PTC user. Customers are encouraged to join and help guide product development and the direction of the Arbortext products at PTC. In the next column, we've got the advisory line for Arbortext. Sometimes you just need some quick assistance and don't have time to wait for the user community to get back to you. The advisory line gets your question answered without having to engage long-term consulting. The Arbortext resources page is the top resources, short list of 4 to 5 that you absolutely must know if you're an Arbortext user. At dataxml.org, there's a blog mostly used for announcements with respect to Arbortext user group meetings and the DITA community and things that intersect the two. And the Squidoo lens is all things Arbortext in one place. It's kind of what Squidoo is all about. In the last 2 columns, we've got the Arbortext PTC user group. It's all virtual, meets on the 4th Saturday, and the PTC User World event just happened last month. It's a worldwide conference for all PTC products, including Arbortext. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, there are videos on YouTube, there is even an Arbortext podcast on iTunes. It's voices from the Arbortext community, longtime users sharing their knowledge so that there's a place for you to go and get that knowledge in a place that's accessible. The single sourcing blog is also available on the Kindle, and there are many, many Arbortext people on Twitter, and the Listorious list sort of keeps track of that. As to who we are, who's PTC? PTC is a global company of over 5,000 employees who are passionate about solving product development challenges. Since their inception, they've been at the forefront of technology innovation in product development and technology and information dynamic development challenges. Their customers have shown confidence in more than 25 years, trusting them to give life to their product development strategies and product ideas. There's an Arbortext business unit inside of PTC that's focused on stability with continued investment in the Arbortext product line. There are over 300 engineering R&D professionals and a combined force of over 1,000 global support service professionals and they are continuing to evolve and improve the product suite. There are more dedicated resources focused on enterprise content strategy and information technology than any other provider in the market. Single sourcing solutions, who are we? We're 100% focused on Arbortext. This is where we come from. It's what we do. We come with 25 years experience in publishing, and the last decade has been directly with the Arbortext product line. We've spent the last decade doing real-world mission-critical XML development, and our team can help assess what you need to get the best in your best-of-class for dynamic publishing solutions and give you a competitive edge. We act as mentors, helping existing staff from purchasing through implementation to full adoption. Our approach is to provide concierge service that gives you just the right amount of assistance at the right time. Thanks for coming today. Janice?
Thank you for that, and thank you, Pushpinder, again for your time. That was a fabulous presentation, and to our attendees, thank you very much for your questions. Again, this has been recorded, and I will have the posting up, and I will send you an announcement once that's up, and it should take the next couple of days, and it should be there soon. Thank you for attending. I hope to see you at our next web session.